The moment Judge Beryl Howell banged her gavel and tried to silence Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, she had no idea she was about to witness a masterclass in political strategy that would leave the entire courtroom speechless. What happened in the next 30 seconds didn't just shock everyone in the room, it completely changed the game of American politics forever. Crockett stood up slowly, her eyes locked on the judge, and pulled out a single document that would expose everything. The silence was deafening. Even the court reporter stopped typing. What you're about to see is the moment a young Texas congresswoman turned the tables on one of the most powerful judges in America, and trust me, you won't believe how she did it. Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what happens next will blow your mind. You don't want to miss how Jasmine Crockett outsmarted the entire judicial system with one brilliant move. To understand why this moment was so explosive, you need to know who these two women really are and what was at stake in that courtroom. Judge E. Beryl Howell isn't just any judge. She's been on the federal bench for over a decade, appointed during the previous administration with a reputation for running her courtroom like a military operation. At 62, she's known for her sharp tongue and zero tolerance for what she considers political theater. Legal experts across the country respect her, but they also fear her. When Judge Howell speaks, lawyers listen. When she makes a ruling, it rarely gets overturned. Her background shaped her judicial philosophy in ways that would prove crucial to this confrontation. Born into a family of prosecutors, she'd spent her early career climbing the ladder in the federal system, earning a EI reputation as someone who never backed down from powerful defendants or high-profile cases. She'd prosecuted organized crime figures, corrupt politicians, and white-collar criminals who thought their connections would protect them. That prosecutorial mindset carried over to her judicial work. In her courtroom, efficiency mattered more than emotion. Rules mattered more than public opinion. She'd famously told a group of law students that courts are not democracy in action. They're where democracy comes to be tested against the law. It was a philosophy that had served her well for years, earning praise from legal scholars who appreciated her no-nonsense approach to complex cases. But that same philosophy had also earned her critics, particularly among civil rights advocates, who argued that her rigid interpretation of judicial authority left little room for the kind of democratic accountability that kept institutions honest. They pointed to her pattern of dismissing cases that challenged judicial procedures, her reluctance to allow extensive testimony from community advocates, and her tendency to view any criticism of court operations as an attack on the rule of law itself. The tension between these worldviews, judicial authority versus democratic accountability, had been building for years. Judge Howell represented the traditional view that courts should be insulated from political pressure, allowed to make decisions based purely on legal precedent and judicial wisdom. Critics argued that this insulation had become isolation, that federal courts had become so removed from public oversight that they'd forgotten they served the people, not the other way around. For months, she'd been handling high-profile political cases, and she was getting tired of what she saw as grandstanding from elected officials who treated her courtroom like their personal stage. She'd already dismissed several politicians' attempts to speak during proceedings, earning praise from legal scholars who said she was restoring dignity to the judicial process. But Jasmine Crockett, she's a completely different story. At 33, the Texas congresswoman had only been in office for 2 years, but she'd already made waves as one of the most fearless voices in politics. A former civil rights attorney, she'd built her career defending people who couldn't defend themselves. She grew up in St. Louis in a working-class family where her mother worked 2 jobs and her father drove trucks to make ends meet. Education was her way out, and she used it to become the voice for people who looked like her family. But Crockett's path to this moment hadn't been straightforward. After law school, she'd started at a prestigious firm, thinking that corporate law would provide the financial security her family had never known. Within 6 months, she was miserable. The work felt meaningless, disconnected from the struggles she'd grown up witnessing. When a senior partner made a racist comment during a partners' meeting, assuming she wouldn't object, she realized she was in the wrong place entirely. That night, she called her mother, expecting sympathy. Instead, her mother asked her a question that changed everything. "Baby, are you using your gifts to help people like us, or are you using them to help people who already have everything they need?" The next Monday, Crockett walked into the senior partner's office and quit. 6 months later, she was working for a civil rights organization, making a third of her corporate salary and loving every minute of it. She spent the next 8 years representing families facing foreclosure, workers dealing with wage theft, and communities fighting environmental racism. She learned how the legal system really worked, not the pristine version taught in law school, but the messy, often unfair reality that most Americans experienced. Her political awakening came during a case involving a family whose child had been poisoned by contaminated water in their neighborhood.